Hello again and welcome back to our course on Excel 2013. In this section we're going to take our first look at Excel, and the first thing I want to talk about is how you're going to start Excel each time that you're going to run it. Now there are several ways of doing this, and the way I'm going to do it on this occasion is I've actually put a shortcut to Excel 2013 on my Windows desktop. I'm running this course on Windows 8, and of course I could start Excel 2013 from my start screen by tapping the relevant tile on my start screen. I could pin Excel 2013 to my taskbar on the Windows 8 desktop. So there's three different ways of starting it. Of course, if you're using Windows 7, you'll have a start menu you could start it from, or indeed pin it to the start menu. So whichever way you start it, let's get Excel 2013 started. There's my shortcut. I'm actually going to double tap and Excel 2013 opens up. Now, even if you've used Excel 2010, this start screen will seem rather strange to you. It's nothing like the one you used to receive in Excel 2010. So let me just do a quick tour of this screen. On the left, we have facilities to open existing workbooks. And as we work through the first few workbooks on the course, we'll see recently opened workbooks appearing in a list on the left here. This is particularly useful to enable you to open work you've been doing recently. But this general button here, Open Other Workbooks, gives us access to any workbooks that are available. The bigger right-hand section here is basically the one for creating new workbooks, and the emphasis in Excel 2013 is to give you access to a range of templates that you can use as a starting point for workbooks. I mentioned these earlier on. There is also a link here, very specifically, Welcome to Excel, which gives you a tour of Excel 2013. So whether or not you've used Excel before, I suggest you take a little bit of time out to try that. The very first option here is blank workbook, and you'll very often start with a blank workbook. If you know what you want to do and you don't need a template of some sort, that's a good starting point. In the top right hand corner we have some very important little buttons up here. The three on the right, the X is close, as you'd expect in a Windows application. We have a maximize button to maximize the window, a minimize button to minimize the window, and of course if it was maximized we'd have a restore button to put it back to the last sized size, which was not max or min. And then very importantly, with the question mark here, and bear in mind I mentioned this earlier, if you're using a touch device and you don't have an F1 key, for example, to bring up help, if you've started Excel 2013 by either double clicking a shortcut on your desktop or you've tapped from the start screen, you tap that question mark to bring up help, and from there you can get through to the touch options as I mentioned before. So let me just quickly touch that. Now it's important to realize here that with Excel 2013 we're dealing with online help here. So if you're not connected to the internet you won't see this online help. There are other help options available, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later on the course. But if you've got an internet connection you can get to online help. Get the word touch in there, and then you can do that search and you can find out all about those touch gestures that I mentioned before. When you finish looking at help at the moment, if you click on the close button up here, that takes you back into Excel 2013 again. So the first thing I'd like to do is to open one of the sample workbooks that's included with the course material. As I mentioned earlier on, you should have a folder that you can find easily where you can access these files. I've got mine in a folder. I've also got a shortcut to that folder. If you click on Open Other Workbooks here, this brings up a screen where we can choose from basically four options. We have opening from recent workbooks. So when we've got a recent workbooks list, it'll be down there and we can choose one of the ones that we've opened recently. We can choose from my SkyDrive. I actually have a SkyDrive account set up with some files in it. I'm going to show you how to set up your own SkyDrive later on. These are basically workbooks that are saved on Microsoft's infrastructure and that I can reach from basically anywhere in the world. Computer refers to my computer. It'll also include access to a network if I'm attached to a network. And then I can also add another place here somewhere else that I would like to be able to access my Excel workbooks from. So I'm going to choose computer on this occasion, and as you can see here on the list of recent folders, so this is folders on my computer that I've accessed recently, there is actually a shortcut to the folder where I've put all those exercise files. Now obviously I could use that now, but I want to use browse to show you what it's like to use the first time. So if I click on browse, it takes me into an open dialog for my computer, and I know that on my desktop I've got a shortcut to where the sample files are. So let me just double click on the shortcut, and there are those sample files. Now that's the first one. I'm going to open that one. Of course I can open it either by clicking and then clicking open, or in fact by tapping to select it and then tapping the open button. Now when we opened the file, and you'll see the name of that file right at the top of the window here, ssi-excel2013-example-01.xlsx. That file is referred to as a workbook, and I've used the term workbook quite a bit already on this course. It's basically a file, and within that file you can have one or more spreadsheets, what we call in Excel worksheets. Worksheet and spreadsheet basically mean the same thing. Now if you look right at the bottom of the window here, you'll see sheet 1, and this particular workbook has got 3 sheets in it: sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. Each of them is a spreadsheet, each of them is a worksheet, but they're all in the same workbook. Now when you're working with Excel, you will very often, to do a particular job, need one workbook, and quite often within that workbook you'll only need one worksheet. And really how many workbooks and how many worksheets in those workbooks you need just depends on the job. Now in this case, if I want to look at what's on sheet 2, I click it to select it, and as you can see within this grid here, which I'll talk about later on, there's nothing. To select sheet 3 I'll do exactly the same thing, or indeed I can tap. That selects it, and you can see that there's nothing on that one either. So let me just tap sheet 1 again. Now from now on, whenever I'm just single clicking, just take it that single click and single tap are the same thing. So I'll say click it, and that will be the same as saying tap it. Similarly, when I say double click something, that's the same as saying double tap something. So I'm not going to keep repeating tap equivalent to click. So we're now looking again at sheet 1 in this workbook, and on sheet 1 we actually have some data. You will see the horizontal rows and vertical columns here, and at each intersection of a row and a column you have one of these little shapes. These are called cells. So each of these cells, if I click in it, or tap obviously, if I click in it, that's one cell in a worksheet. And with each cell it's in a column and it's in a row. Now look at the cell that I've got selected here. The column is F, the row is 4. We call this cell the cell F4. Several of the cells on this sheet have some content. So for instance, C3 says 5 p.m. B6 says 8 a.m. A9 says Sunday. And later on in the course we're going to start to look at what this data means, how to change it, how to put data in, and so on. But for the moment just note that some of the cells have got content. Also note that some of the cells, like this one, seem to be much bigger than all the others. It's actually sort of 3 cells stuck together. That's what we call a merged cell, and we'll talk about merging cells later as well. But for the moment, having had a look at this first sample workbooks, what we're going to do now is to close it. So when you want to work on a workbook, you open it, you do the work you're going to do, and then you close it. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, you may have more than one workbook open at a time, but certainly in the early stage of the course we'll tend to only have one open at a time. So when we finish working on it, we close it. And this introduces us to another very important concept in Excel 2013. In fact, it's pretty much universal throughout Office 2013, and that's access to something called Backstage View. Now to access Backstage View, you use this special button near the top left corner. It's File, and if I click on File, that takes me into Backstage View. Now, Backstage View is basically where you do all the admin and maintenance side of workbooks. It's where you do everything to a workbook that you don't actually do in the book itself. So from here you can do things like create a new workbook, open a workbook, save a workbook, print it, share it, and in this case close it. So on this occasion all I'm going to do is to close that workbook. So click on Close, and the workbook closes. And one thing you'll notice is that Excel 2013 now seems to be completely empty, in that there's nothing at all there. There's no spreadsheet there, there's no rows, there's no cells, there's nothing. So there we are. When I've finished working with Excel 2013, what I then will do is to close Excel 2013 itself. Of course, I could at this point open another workbook, but I want to show you what's happened as a consequence of what we've just done. So I'm just going to close Excel, and then in the next section we're going to start it up again, and after having another look at what happens when we open Excel 2013, we're going to create a new workbook. So please join me in the next section. Let's close it. That's it.